morning, everybody. It is time for Coffee and Football Wednesday morning. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Jerry Hamilton, CJ Vogel filling in for Blake Monroe, who is out today. Got a couple sick kiddos. Hey, guys, Longhorn baseball team lost. News alert last night in extra innings, 8-7 to UTSA. They now fall to 17-2 on the season. We'll have more about that. But, of course, big news today. Texas Longhorn basketball team in action tonight in Dayton, going up against Xavier, the Musketeers out of Cincinnati. Should be a home game, we think, of sorts for Xavier. Dayton only about an hour and a half out of Cincinnati. So we expect that to be a big one. But it also is big for Rodney Terry's future for the Longhorns as well. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the freshmen that we started discussing yesterday morning, and what our expectations, what we think reasonable expectations are for those guys, as well as a number of different topics today. Let's say hello first to Jerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel. Jerry, out and about. What Starbucks are you at, and why?
Just Missouri, a little bit in Missouri City this morning, man. I'm in Missouri City this morning. Out on the move a little bit today, so. Got that going, but already got the hook 'em 1029 talking about the Tar Heels winning. My opinion hasn't changed. They shouldn't have been in the tournament. I mean, why they didn't deserve to be in the tournament. Once you get in the tournament, anything can happen. Shaka Smart went to a Final Four after losing 4 of his last 5 regular season games. When 1-2 didn't even win his conference tournament, they got in as 11 seed, went all the way to the Final Four. Teams can get hot. I mean, last night, Santa Clara beat UC Irvine 101-62 in the NIT. I'm sure their fans this morning are saying, hey, we should have been in the tournament. But on the resume basis, Carolina should not have been in. Nothing changed. But the tournament, once the tournament starts, anything can happen.
I've got to admit, when I saw the score, because I did not watch the game live, when I saw the score, I knew you were going to be taken to task by somebody. Hey, well, Jerry, time out. Take your medicine, my man.
It's not medicine. It's not medicine.
When you talk that big game, you got to take your medicine.
That's what I'm saying. They should still not have been in the tournament. They didn't have.
I'm saying you got to take your medicine. Take your medicine like a man.
No, my point is they should not have been in the tournament. They hadn't beaten an NCAA tournament team since December 21st, since 2024. They should not have been in the tournament. Period. But that's where we're at. And once you get in the tournament, anything can happen for the people that want Rodney fired. Who knows what happens in the NCAA tournament?
I will say that they've now beaten another NCAA tournament in 2025. Just put that out there. I'm going after Jerry today.
That's their first one. Glad they got one.
Blake is not the moderator today, so you and I can go at each other a little bit more.
I got to put on a ref shirt, huh?
Yes, you need to be the referee here. You need the black and white shirt. The striped shirt. CJ Vogel, welcome. Good morning to you, buddy. You followed the baseball game last night. I know that. What happened with the Longhorns on the diamond?
Yeah, it wasn't a great pitching night. Drew Rarick got the start, didn't record an out, only faced about 4 batters. And I thought Cade Bing actually looked tremendous on the hill. He gave Texas about 4.5 innings, 2/3 innings or so. Then you start looking into the back end. There are a lot of walks, a lot of long counts, a lot of Texas relievers up to about 40, 50 pitches. Not necessarily ideal when it comes to what's ahead this weekend against LSU, of course. And then the big scare, right? Andre Duplantier. I mean, getting right up on the hill after being called in from the bullpen. Throwing about 2 warm-up pitches and calling the trainer and Schlossnagel out to the mound, and he left immediately. So we did not see 88 last night. A bit of a scare. Word is after the game that Dre is going to be okay, which is a great sign for this weekend and the long term moving forward. But yeah, not a great night. Credit to UTSA because they fouled off a lot of contested pitches. They made some timely hits, obviously the home run in the 12th inning. And they had a lot of really impressive defensive plays that prevented the Longhorns from picking up extra bases or getting rallies going, specifically the shortstop on the Adrian Rodriguez rocket right up the middle. Really impressive stuff. But yeah, it was an ugly game overall for the Longhorns. But in baseball, you're due for one of those every now and then. 17-2, not something to hang your hat on, at least. So that's something I think the Longhorns can look at, kind of regroup ahead of LSU and get ready to roll.
You mentioned Duplantier. That's the pitcher that Longhorns. I think really, really talented. Did no more confirmation, or just a tired arm, maybe, or they didn't say anything after the game. Schloss didn't about that injury.
No, nothing specifically other than I think he's going to be okay. Just didn't feel 100% comfortable, but nothing that should be lasting or long term for him.
That would not be good. You don't want to hear about a pitcher's arm in the middle of a season. That's a bad thing. By the way, I want to mention Tony Hills will be joining us around 8:30 this morning. Always happy to hear Tony proselytize about the Longhorns. Jerry, going back to basketball, in all due respect, I respect your opinion on basketball. You know that. You're our resident basketball expert. Longhorns against Xavier today. Anything late breaking that people need to be thinking about or talking about as they watch the game tonight? I think it gets started at 8:30. I mean, these crazy late starts.
8:10, but you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Look, I think with the game within the game, it's going to be really key. Xavier shoots a lot of threes, and then they get to the free throw line a lot. Texas' weakness defensively, they've allowed too many straight line drives, allowed teams to get to the free throw line this year. That is one thing Texas is hyper focused on going into this game. Obviously, you got to guard Ryan Conwell. The Indiana State transfer can really shoot it. The lefty guard has made 97 threes at 41%, which is extremely high in NCAA basketball. They have to guard him. They have to limit his clean looks, but they want to keep Xavier off the free throw line as much as possible. They want to force them into more mid-range jump shots, and we'll see if they can get that accomplished. Zach Freemantle is a tremendous screener. He's a really good college player, 17-7, but within their offense and their spacing, he is a tremendous screener. So you really have to play through around his screens in the screen game. He is tremendous at it. Then on the other end, they have to really force Xavier to guard them. Freemantle, if Texas can get Kaluma and Freemantle matched up, Freemantle will struggle to guard him on the perimeter if they can get him in that matchup. Obviously, if I'm Xavier, I just have Freemantle on Caden Shedrick because he's not a threat off the dribble. But if they can get that matchup with Kaluma on Freemantle, Kaluma will attack him and see if he can get him in foul trouble. I think guarding Ryan Conwell on the three-point line, limiting free throw opportunities, and then forcing Freemantle to guard is going to be big tonight. We'll see what happens.
We will see what happens because Longhorns, it's going to impact Rodney Terry's job future one way or the other. Question I have for this, Jerry, and you would know better than anybody having watched Xavier. Sometimes the Longhorns, because Longhorns generally are a very talented athletic team compared to the smaller conference school teams like a Xavier. Is Texas overwhelmingly athletic compared to a Xavier where Texas might just guard them into oblivion, if that makes sense? Like kind of what happened, looks like San Diego State last night against North Carolina.
Look, I don't think so. I mean, Xavier's beat UConn, Marquette, in Creighton in conference play. I mean, they've beaten really talented, really good basketball teams who play different styles. I think Xavier struggled against ball pressure some, and watching them against Marquette obviously shock his style. But I don't think Sean Miller, he's going to be overwhelmed, or Xavier's going to be overwhelmed. They play in a strong conference. I really think Texas needs to get off to a good start in this game. Obviously, that's always the case, but they really need to get off to a good start in this game. And I think make Xavier guard them as hard as Xavier's going to make Texas guard them on their offensive end. Texas really has to make Xavier guard. I think Xavier doesn't have great depth. They're playing really 7.5 players right now is what Miller wants to do. Call it 7, and then a couple of guys that will play 10 minutes, but he really tries to limit that bench in tight games, big games. Texas needs to get him into that bench a little more and earlier if they can.
I tell you what, people in the chat concerned about Andre Duplantier. guys. So we'll see what happens with the Longhorns pitcher. CJ saying, as of right now, everything sounds good, but that'd be a big hit against the Longhorns in baseball if they could not have that guy. Hey, before we get going further, I want to say thank you to our Wednesday sponsor. That is Adam Lowy, our friend over at the Lowy Law Firm. Adam and his group have been helping injured Texans for decades, 2+ decades, actually. I just saw Adam. He does his best to give back to the community. They just named the Northwest Hills Little League ballpark after Adam because he made a big donation to them. He tries to give back, also sponsors part of the Moody Arena there in Austin for the Longhorns. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, and you want a first-class representation, give Adam and his group a call. Reach out to them at loweylawfirm.com. The thing that they do is they offer free, no strings attached consultation to see if you might be due some level of compensation for your accident. That's Adam Lowy and his group at Lowy Law Firm. Thank you for what you do, not only for On Texas Football, but for folks around the state of Texas. Adam and his group. All right, CJ, hey, we've got a little bit of recruiting news and team news that we want to get to. We were without you yesterday morning, CJ. So we went over some of the top players we had expectations of for some freshmen. Wanted to ask you, because Jerry and I got into a little discussion about the secondary. And while I don't have a graphic to bring up for you, talk about what you think of the new members of the secondary, and let's see if what you're hearing behind the scenes matches or jives a little bit with what Jerry and I are hearing as well. Break down the newcomers in the secondary from Cade Phillips, Grayson Littleton, Caleb Chester, Jonah Williams, as well as Zealous Hicks, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. I'll start with corner, of course, because we haven't heard a whole lot about Jonah Williams with him being across the highway at the dish. But at corner, it's Cade Phillips, who's kind of been the lead guy in terms of reports coming out of DKR. You might expect that with the 5-star pedigree, but super athletic guy, a guy that's been willing to come in and work right away. Someone that I've heard is going to be pushing for playing time, whether that's a starting position or not, that remains to be seen. But he's going to push a Santana Wilson, a Warren Roberson, a Kobe Black for play time opposite of Manny Muhammad. And then Grayson Littleton. Look, I think that's a guy that's surprising a lot of folks, right? And right now, when he came in and when he signed with Texas fans didn't know a whole lot about him. And there wasn't a lot of information about him as a result of him joining the class as late as he did. But right now he's turning heads as well. And of course, we've always talked about Caleb Chester and his football IQ, his ability to talk the game, to sit down, understand what he is watching. And that's been a big strength of his as well. Zealous Hicks, big body. Right. And I think that's something that is surprising at the moment is how well he's moving for a young guy, a guy that reclassified, big body coming in, ready to rock. And then, of course, Jonah on the opposite side. Look, if I could pick one of the guys that would make the biggest impact early on, it would be Cade Phillips based off of some conversations. I know in those throwing sessions, they don't go all the way out in one-on-ones, but he is turning some headway and, making things difficult for these wide receivers whenever they do go up against corners in throwing sessions. So early on, strong returns about all the entire group. And when you look at that cornerback room specifically, who starts to stand out, who starts to maybe emerge as some special teams guys, I think Texas has some really talented pieces there. Who might be a gunner, I think also is in the conversation of this group. I look at Caleb Chester, a smart, intellectual football player, as a guy that could be in that conversation. But Cade Phillips right now probably leading the way in terms of what I've been hearing behind the scenes.
What about Jerry? Does that match with you? Because I've been hearing a lot about Grayson Littleton as well.
But yeah, I think Grayson Littleton is going to be so interesting because, as I've said before, Mark Orfe actually recruited him as a corner at Rutgers. And when Littleton committed to Texas, and when I was by there in November, he was like, well, Texas recruited him as a nickel or corner. Same thing Michigan was. But Orfe recruited him as a corner at Rutgers, so I think it's going to be really interesting there positionally. But I think Cade Phillips, look, from a pure just talent standpoint, if you talk an upside, he may be a top 4 or 5 guy in this class. And that's saying something in a number 1 class. And look, I think the main thing there is how quickly does he transition to really locking in and learning the corner spot, because all these guys are different. Cade played receiver, he played corner, right? But Manny Muhammad played corner all the way coming up, and we've mentioned this before, and that's different. So I think Cade's done very well, and we'll see how quickly he picks up the nuances of the position in this spring. But I have really high hopes for both of those guys, honestly. And Caleb Chester, by the way. You're not going to hear as much about Caleb Chester, but down the line, remember that name.
CJ, I'm glad you also mentioned the size of Zealous Hicks, because everybody I talked to is like, dude, that dude's kind of big. They're like, I mean, for a young guy that's still growing, he might be one of those. All right, let's bring in our special guest. Every Wednesday, we bring in our man, Tony Hills, and he always brings the juice. We were talking about bringing the juice the other day. Tony, how you doing this Wednesday, buddy?
Man, I'm doing excellent, wonderfully well. Too blessed to be stressed. And if I was, Bobby, CJ, and Jerry, you guys would not know about it. Wake up. It's coffee and football. What's going on? How you guys doing today, man?
Have you filled out
Tony,
your bracket?
what do you drink? We gotta ask, because look, I drink coffee to get me going. What in the hell do you drink to get going, buddy?
Oh, man. Bobby, listen, man. I drink expectation. Expectation is energy, man. Expectation is energy, bro. Every time I wake up, I'm excited. I'm happy. I'm joyous. There's a lot of things that I'm doing in the background, and it requires for me to have a lot of energy. So when you put that expectation on success, man, come on. Plus, like, bro, I'm on here with you guys. What are we talking about?
Hey, I love it when you sprinkle a little bit of that magic on us, Tony. Go ahead, Jerry.
Hey, Tony, did you fill out your bracket? Who do you have?
I did not fill out my bracket.
March Madness, Tony.
I know it's March Madness, man. I'm running behind, man. I've been moving and shaking, but I tell you what I'll do, Jerry. If it's not too late, I'll fill it out today. And I tell you what, even if I miss the opportunity to make some money on it, I'm gonna fill it out anyway, just so I can be a participant.
Hey, Tony,
so who do I got? Who do I got? Listen, I know. Okay, there's two sides of me. All right, there's the logical side, okay, and then there's the homer. So you already know who I got. Right,
yeah.
Tony. This is a good question for a former player. I think I don't know if you've ever been on a team where the coach's job was in peril. Okay, but Roddy Terry's job is in peril right now. We don't know if he's going to be the coach at the University of Texas this time next week. As a player, what are you thinking as you're going through that? I mean, obviously you want to help your coach keep the job, but is there anything a player or a competitor like yourself is thinking about when something like that is hanging over the team?
I think it's subjective, Bobby, to each individual player about how they feel about their coach. You know, you would think that, okay, hey, this is the guy that we're playing for. We want to go out there and ride with him. But it's, sometimes, man, change is good. And so I look at it from the perspective of how are the players playing? I think that answers the question. Are these guys still going out there and fighting hard? Are these guys still going out there and competing? Or do you see them being lackadaisical at times? If the game is getting a little bit away from them, do they still have that zeal and still have that fight? That's how you look to see how they respect the coach. Me personally, I have been in those type of situations. And for me, especially on the professional level, it's a little different for the case of I'm playing for my job as well. So regardless of what's going on in the front office, I'm not really worried about that. But from a standpoint in this type of situation, I mean, I think it adds a little bit of extra angst to these guys to be able to go out there and make something happen. Look, I mean, if this guy has connected with them and he's just not gotten the results on the court, that's one thing, right? And so, but if he's somebody that they don't respect, then we're going to find out when they play Xavier if they're ready to throw in the towel. So I don't think that's a one-way answer. I just think that it's subjective depending on the players and how they feel about the coach.
Tony, sticking on that same note, obviously social media has amplified everything as of late in sports, right? You hear, you see, it's hard to ignore it as a guy that's been in the league and has seen changes in the front office. How often do you hear about the gripes amongst fans, or how does that trickle into the locker room? And as a guy that's been in these locker rooms, I mean, is it about coming together and just shutting everything out, or is it just up to the individual to say, hey, I got a job to do regardless of who's coaching or who's calling plays or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, there's a message that's preached, but at the end of the day, I think, CJ, you got to look at it too. There's the generational differences, right? Like when I was coming up, this social media thing was just now getting started, right? And these kids now, they are engulfed in it. This is their life, right? So if I'm putting myself into their type of situation, into their mindset, I'm saying to them, if I'm a teammate of them, I'm telling them, hey man, look, at the end of the day, there's always going to be outside noise. The only opinion that matters is the opinion in this room, right? And for us to stay focused. Because at the end of the day, you worried about what writers are writing about or people are saying. How does that help the situation? It doesn't. The only thing that helps the situation in sports is going out there and being focused, putting together and stringing together practices, gelling with your team. And then when it's time to compete, the team that goes out there and competes the hardest and makes the fewest mistakes in all sports is the ones that win. So how do we continue to get better each and every day in each and every play and each and every practice? That's the focus. For me personally, man, it's too much to get done in the day for me to be focusing on what the outside people are saying, because 95% of them have never been in the position that you're in. And so when you can think of it from that perspective of understanding, like, hey, man, I'm in a great position to be able to compete on the highest level in the best conference with the best school in the nation. Let me focus on the things that I need to do to get better so that I can go out and put it on the field, on the hardwood, on the diamond, whatever sport we're talking about.
Right. Hey, Tony, I wanted to ask you, spring practice starts a week from yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's easy for you guys to lock in during a season, game weeks, Saturdays, but in spring practice, is it more? I know the competitive side, and I know you're competing for jobs, but was it harder as a young player? Because this number one recruiting class is going to get a lot of attention, right? Was it harder as a young player to learn how to maybe lock in for spring practice with the correct mindset that's easy to have during a season?
I understand the question. Here's how I answer it. As a young player, you're unproven. Yeah. So every single day, every single time you step foot on that field, you have to prove yourself. So if you're coming in unfocused in any single day, you might as well go ahead and step to the back and get ready to put that shirt on that we call red, because you're already showing that you're immature and you cannot handle being at the University of Texas or being a professional, because that's the role that these college kids are in now. It is no longer just, oh, I'm representing the pride of my school. Like, no, man. And I've said this before on the show, CJ, as a left tackle now, if I'm Trevor Gooseby, there's going to be a lot of onus on making sure that I'm playing the plays and doing everything that I need to do at the ultimate expectation of elevation, right? Why? Because I got a $1 million man sitting behind me. So I'm not just protecting the hopes and dreams of a SEC and a national championship. I'm now protecting money. And I can tell you this, when it comes down to protecting money, they're not playing any games. So the level of expectation because of that add-on has now elevated for these young guys as well. So yeah, if you're not locked in, I don't care what season we're in, every single day in the locker room, right? How you clean your locker, how you pick up the trash around the locker room, everything that you do, we're looking for excellence. That's how it has to be, because how you do one thing is how you do everything.
I can only imagine the screams in those practices to stay away from the quarterback are going to get louder and louder as a result of that, Tony.
Listen, these guys are going to be rushing. They're going to be looking like NASCAR drivers, taking left turns every single time they get close, man. That's the future. And that's the reality. It's like now they're in a situation. And to be honest, I actually love this for them, right? Because it's literally preparing them for what the next level is like. Now you're in a situation to understand, and Sark gets this, right? And Flood gets this too. They've been at that level. You're in a situation to where you're now being trained for the next level. It's one thing to talk about, hey, we're this college and we put this amount of players in the league and X, Y, and Z. That's one thing. It's another thing now to say, this is what they do up there, and we're copycatting that same situation here in the practice format. Now I have repetition within that space, right? So from that perspective, I love this for these young kids.
Tony, finish up here with you this morning. Thank you for your time again, as always. I had to ask you, do you have a favorite spring football memory? Jerry mentioned it starts Tuesday coming up. Do you have a specific memory of a spring practice that is special to you for any particular reason?
Man, there were so many of them, man. I think I'll tell you what, it wasn't one practice. The 2000 and let's see, we won in 05. So the 06-07 season. Dude, I mean, obviously the defense is light years ahead of us. You got all of these new guys that's coming in on the line, right? So we're getting taken to the woodshed. And there was a time where I just had to look at myself in the mirror and understand, like, all right, bro, you're the leader of this team. So all this is reflective on you. So we had to sit down as an offensive line and decided, like, hey, if we're going to do anything this season, it's going to start with us. We gotta figure this out. We got to lock in and get it done, right? And you started gradually seeing us getting better. It would start with, okay, we win a period, and then we go from winning a period to winning an entire section, and then we go from winning a section to now starting to win practice. So the maturation of that 06-07 season of the offensive line, of us getting better because of our defense, I think that might have been our favorite moment, right? Because a lot of people look to things as it pertains to, the big plays, or I did this or I did that. For me, it was the collective and the sum of the whole of all of us getting better together. And, we went out and put together a decent season. And so that started in spring practice. So I think that all encompassing was my favorite moment.
Kind of the gelling together and improvement overall.
Yeah, man, because it's a thing that's not about, it's not an individual thing. It's an us thing. And as an offensive line, we're going to get individual awards at some point down the line. I mean, obviously we saw that with Kelvin and we saw that with Sweat, right? We see that. But at the end of the day, for an offensive line, every guy has to be good. Every guy has to be doing their job, because you could have 4 people doing it and 1 people mess up and the whole play is ruined. So you're only as strong as your line. And that's one of the groups that you have to have that gel, right? You have to have that gel. And so I'll say this too, Bobby, because you asked me something about why do I always wake up with energy. I believe perspective is a superpower, right? And it is of my perspective at 8:43 in the morning that Texas is the greatest school in the nation and OU still sucks. I appreciate you guys. Hook 'em for life.
I got one more question you have to answer before you get out of here, Tony.
You got a question. Let's go. Okay.
All right. This is for the chat too, but I want Tony's answer.
Come on, chat.
Who's the best football player you've ever seen in person?
Woo, Lord. Golly, Jerry. Oh, man. Okay. The best football player that I've ever seen in person. I'll tell you this. I won't say he's the best football player I've ever seen in person, but he's one of the most impactful players that I've ever seen do some of the most outlandish and outrageous things in person. That would be Troy Polamalu.
Oh,
I have never seen, and I look, and Ed Reed, listen, we get phenomenal. I'm not taking anything from Ed, because you always know it was Ed and Troy. But man, the stuff that I seen Troy do just in practice was ridiculous. Like, it's some players that when you look at them, you just tip your hat and let the coach know, look, I'm never going to be that. So we got to figure out who I am, because that ain't going to work. That stuff that he's doing is not going to work. So I say Troy Polamalu.
That's awesome. Tony, thank you so much for your time, buddy. You be good and have a good week, man.
All right, y'all too. Hook 'em, baby.
All right, hook 'em. You take care of yourselves, man.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Tony.
you. All right, that is Tony Hills joining us from somewhere up in Dallas. I know he bebops around that Dallas area. And make sure y'all check him out, other platforms, etc. Hey, CJ and Jerry, before we move on, we got to do a couple of ad reads, but I want to mention this. As he was talking about that gelling together of that offensive line, I immediately thought that what a great metaphor for this season, for this offensive line that replaces 4 of 5 starters, moving positions a little bit with Cole Hudson, for example. Younger guys coming in like Nato Miyazulu. You wonder what's going to happen at right tackle with whether it's going to be Brandon Baker, Andre Kojo, Jaden Chapman. They've got to figure some things out, but they need a leader to do that. Tony got those guys together and went in that direction. Y'all have any thoughts on that part of his discussion and where this Texas offensive line needs to take them and needs to go this spring?
For me, it's going to be really interesting to see who becomes that leader. He talked about left tackle, Trevor Gooseby kind of being the guy that's protecting the backside of $1 million man, right? to become that guy, obviously, to fill in the shoes of a Kelvin Banks, you got to be able to walk in and command the respect of the coaches, your teammates, your guys in that room. I think Gooseby proved that he could play at a very high level late last year. Now to come in as a first-time starter with a room otherwise with a lot of first-time starters and DJ Campbell, obviously, you got to be able to command that respect, do it, the way that the coaches are expecting, lead by example on the field as well. That's going to be interesting because I think we saw Texas utilize a Kelvin Banks who led more by example than with his words, where you had Jake Majors on the inside who was the vocal piece, right? The mouthpiece of that offensive line. Who's going to step up and be that? You'd like it to be Cole Hudson, right? You'd like it for one of those three guys in the middle to kind of become that new leader vocally. Is that NATO's MO? I don't know. Is that DJ Campbell's? Maybe not, but I think a Cole Hudson, I think a Trevor Gooseby can certainly get in that conversation. And I know it's young for Brandon Baker to be in this mix as well, but that would be huge if that was a guy who could build year after year as a vocal leader in that conversation as well.
Jerry, who do you think becomes the leader on that offensive line?
I think it'll be Trevor Gooseby will be the leader, more than likely. But Cole Hudson could, if he wins outright that center job. I think that competition could determine a leader as well. I wanted to say this, though. What's interesting, since CJ talked about the Texas part, the three teams that have the best odds right now in the betting world are the favorites for the national championship are Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas. All three schools replace 4 starters on the offensive line. Which offensive line is going to gel next season? Will be interesting amongst those three teams because Georgia's in the same boat as Texas. And I'm pretty sure Ohio State lost 4 as well prior, not off the team that played in the national championship game, but when McLaughlin was healthy, when Josh Simmons was healthy, pretty sure they lost 4 as well. So all three of those teams lost 4 starters on their offensive line and have the same questions headed into the spring. And that's your 3 favorites in the betting world.
All right, Jerry, tell us a little bit about Mando before we go forward to the next topic.
Woo! San Diego State, baby. You need this read after last night. Woo! Whole body deodorant, safe to use anywhere on your body. The pits, the balls, the thigh folds, the belly buttons, butt cracks, and the feet. Created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. That's Mando, clinically proven to block odor all day and control odor for up to 72 hours. Mando deodorant product options are a solid stick deodorant, formulated and powered by mandelic acid to stop out odor before it starts, and spray deodorant, aluminum-free and ideal for the hard-to-reach places. All products are baking soda-free and paraben-free. Choose from a variety of fresh scents like bourbon leather, Clover Woods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. This is very important for San Diego State basketball fans. Clinically proven to control odor better than shower with soap alone. 12 hours after a shower, the average man's Grundle odor was a 5 out of 10. San Diego State's is a 15 out of 10, and that's tough living in San Diego. With Mando, the average Grundle odor level is 0 out of 10. That's what you're shooting for, Aztec basketball. Want to try America's #1 whole body deodorant formula right now? You can find them at Walmart, Target, and other retailers across the country. For the best deals, go to shopmando.com. Mando's starter pack is perfect for our new customers. It comes with solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to 40% off your starter pack using code on Texas, all caps, at shopmando.com. I never thought I'd be bringing San Diego State basketball into a Mando read, but I did this morning.
CJ, tell us about Prize Picks, bud.
Yeah, if Mando was for San Diego State, I mean, I think Prize Picks was for North Carolina if you're taking over all the overs. But Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more, North Carolina, or less, San Diego State, on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get on the action in more than 30 states, including California, Georgia, and right here in the great state of Texas. On Prize Picks, you can mix and match and player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite basketball players with players from baseball, hockey, esports. I'm actually big on esports, let me tell you, and much more. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money, or even if one of your picks doesn't hit. That's what makes Prize Picks great to me. Look, I've been that close plenty of times. And with Flex Play, I no longer have to worry about missing just one. I can still win money despite those heartbreaking losses. Download the app today and use the code ONTexas to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, all you have to do is head over to the App Store, download Prize Picks, and use the code ONTexas to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
All right. Thank you, CJ. We appreciate it very much.
Bobby, can I just say, doing the Mando read in public with people walking by is a little different than in your office.
I noticed you went pretty quick over where
that was hitting a little different with people walking by. I'm not gonna lie.
They were asking you about your Grundle level, maybe.
Get this guy at Starbucks out of here.
I'm already laughing when you do the reads as well. I don't need more color to that added or more context added, Jerry.
If I had joy mode today too, it'd really be on here. They'd be kicking me out.
Okay, that needs to be done. Joy mode is in the sanctity of your own home on multiple facets, right, Jerry? Hey, guys, we've got questions we're going to get to as well. I wrote that article yesterday on Texas Football about reasonable expectations for the freshmen. And the other one that I wanted to go back to, and we talked a lot about, CJ, and ask your feelings on this as well, are the wide receiver group. We talked about how there's really 4 of them now, if you include Michael Terry, all right? Because that's what he's working out at. Is there one that kind of sticks out to you as the guy of these true freshmen that we think is going to play more than the other? I will say this. I kind of feel like that person is Jamie French right now. I don't know if that's a really good guess or feeling, or if there's too much left up in the air. Where are you coming out right now on the new wide receiver group from what you're hearing on the inside, CJ, and what you saw in high school even?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Bobby. I think Jamie French is probably the guy in pole position amongst the wide receivers. Look, athletically, we know that's a guy that fits what Sarkisian recruits. I know he's a little taller, but he fits that body type, that skill type with the ball in his hands and with his ability to go get it. Behind the scenes, I've heard he's been very quick to pick up the playbook. I've heard he's been one of those guys that's been very fast to get into lines and throw with the quarterbacks, someone that's figured out ways to understand route concepts, whether that's been talking to quarterbacks, talking to other wide receivers, just making sure that he's in communication with the playbook and Chris Jackson as well. That's one of the things that stood out so far for me in conversations about Jamie French. And that's not to say the other guys aren't, but he's been one that's received those extra words of positivity so far in my eyes. And then look, I think Michael Terry is also going to be a guy that finds the field early on, right? And I think that's because of his versatility. And we've had the long conversation on the winning drive. We've talked about it with Jeff on Monday for Longhorn Weekly as well. Where does he start? Right now it's at wide receiver, but does that role grow? Does that progress into being moved around more, maybe as a sniffer behind the tight end, maybe some in the running back spot, right? It's not a certainty at the moment, but look, we all know where he was recruited as a high schooler. We all know what he could play at Alamo Heights. I think that he's going to provide a lot of versatility for this group moving forward. And also coming in December, I know it's not a whole lot, and as a scout team, you don't learn a whole lot in terms of the overall offense, but that alone shows you how to be a college athlete. That shows you how to get to work every day. He's gone through a couple practices before where these new coming wide receivers have not yet. So those are 2 that I'm keeping a close eye on in the spring. But look, I'm not going to write off Khalid Lockett. I'm not going to write off Dalen McCutcheon. Those guys have a ton of talent too, and it's only going to help this wide receiver room take that next step from within rather than having to go out and get a portal guy or 2.
You know what's crazy for the freshman receivers coming in? When they reported in January, they didn't think DeAndre Moore was going to be out for spring, or very limited, if not out completely. That brings a lot of opportunity for Dalen McCutcheon and even Aaron Butler as a redshirt. We'll see where that goes. But somebody's going to be getting reps where DeAndre Moore's reps were. So that gives it. Maybe Jamie French rotates a little bit in and out there too, because we've heard the same thing. He's picked up the scheme really quickly. But when a starter and a high snap level player is held out or out for the spring, then man, that provides a great opportunity for young players. And I'm really excited to see who's going to make the most of the opportunity, because I think we're going to wait and see. But what that does, CJ, he's from your school, that accelerates Dalen McCutcheon a little bit.
Right.
Is what that provides an opportunity that when he's reported in January, he wasn't thinking he was maybe taking reps with the ones this spring, but suddenly here he is. It's going to be interesting.
I look at it and I feel like it's a combination of who's the guy that's most ready, that may have a lot of upside.
Yeah.
That Sark can kind of groom. And like he did that with Ryan Wingo this year, guys. He kind of groomed Ryan Wingo to eventually, you could feel like Ryan Wingo was as good as you're going to get just about as a freshman from a mental standpoint and the physical standpoint, certainly. But he wasn't going to be the guy. You knew that. It was going to be Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, and most likely DeAndre Moore, based on Moore's tenacity of getting to practice, being the first one there early, etc. I think that it sets up for one of those guys. CJ used the term pole position. I think that's the right word as of right now. That's the right terminology to accept. Hey, we do have some news to go over here. Texas did make a hire. Matt Moran, former assistant special teams coach at both Stanford and James Madison, has left his job at James Madison and joined the Longhorns. He did that about 5 days ago. He announced it yesterday. In jumping for joy mode, can we talk about the new special teams coaching hire, Matt Moran? It's my understanding that he's not an on-the-field coach.
Right.
In the old terminology, where now everybody's an on-the-field coach and the NCAA doesn't care. But he's not one of the guys that's going to be going out recruiting, even deciding who to recruit, et cetera. But he is a specialist coach. So what does that mean? That means Bert Auburn is going to have a guy that's just a kicking coach. Jack Boomeister, the young man from Australia, and Ryan Kern are going to have punting coaches. So this is not – Joe DeCamillis was let me put this the right way, an entire special teams coach.
Right.
He was working on kick return, punt coverage, et cetera. Matt Moran, my understanding is he is a specialist coach. So he's working with the kickers, with the punters. So I hope, jumping for joy mode, I hope that gives you some detail about what he's expected to do. He is not one of the primary assistants, but I think this is great because there are times last year when I was like, man, I hope Bert Auburn's talking to somebody other than just his therapist, right? He needed to go see that person, but he needed some mechanical tweaks as well. I was talking to Jeff Ward the other day about that, Jerry, the former Longhorn kicker who's now an Austin radio personality. And Jeff kicked in the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's like, look, he's just taking his head, he's yanking his head up and it's taking his left shoulder out. And he goes, you could fix him physically in 30 seconds to a minute. You may not be able to fix him mentally ever. Right. That's up to the player. So, but to that point, Steve Sarkisian addresses something that maybe was a missing factor a year ago for his teams.
If I can add real quick to that, Bobby, just a couple nuggets. He spent a lot of time, Matt Moran spent a lot of time at Stanford. Among the kickers, the specialists that he was able to kick was Stanford's all-time leader in field goal percentage, Joshua Carty. And that's a good note right there. And then obviously he spent 1 year at Boston College and another year at James Madison. Well, on that year that he was at Boston College in 2023, he improved the team's field goal percentage from 57% to 83%. I know that's a low bar, but that's quite the jump. So 2 positive nuggets in terms of what he can do with specialists, place kicker specifically. I wanted to add to what he can do here at Texas with Bert Auburn and the future of the Texas kicking game.
We just don't know.
And he's coached kickers in Boston in November, so he can coach cold kickers. Boom, 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 boom.
Unbelievable, Jerry.
Oh,
All right, let's go to the next one. Hey, this one from Jack Lala. Hump day with Hills, given our new Oklahoma State coach. This is the tight end H-back coach. That is another one of those secondary assistants, I guess is. I don't know the best term. An assistant to the assistant. Coach McAdoo. Could you see Sark implementing some of Oklahoma State's cowboy package? Could see Michael Terry as a natural. What do we think of that? Sark, of all people that you would think could use an H-back in a interesting way, Sark would be that guy, right? And beyond that, is Michael Terry the ultimate toy, or is that a Nick Townsend or somebody like that in the H-back role? What do you think? Do you think that Sark leans on that assistant coach from Oklahoma State to bring anything in from Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy?
You know, it's been interesting because every coach that they've brought in so far has brought a piece with them, right? We've talked about Johnny Nansen. I'm excited to see if Dwayne Aquina brings what he brought back in the day to Texas. It's not complete overhauls of the scheme, and I don't think that's ever going to happen. But look, Texas brought in Paul Christ for a reason. You bring in Neil Brown now for a reason. I would imagine that there's one reason for McAdoo to be a guy that brought in at the tight end H-back sniffer role specifically. Now, what is that role for Michael Terry? Look, I could see what Ryan Niblett did last year in that 12 or in that 2-back, that 3-back running back looks. If you just swap that out with the Michael Terry, that versatility is still there, right? You still get a guy that not only can go in routes and can play wide receiver, but you can hand the ball off to him in that regard as well. But also a bigger back. So he now acts as a lead block in several instances. So I don't know if there's tweaks to that. I don't know if that's the package that Michael Terry could specifically be used in, but I'm looking at what Texas did previously and now what some of these extra pieces can add to and tweak to fit the personnel now. And Michael Terry being, 6'2", about 215, Jerry? Is that what we were hearing last week? I think that's a very solid lead back blocking role, physique, if you will. I think it's just an easy plug and play with some simple tweaks on how to kick out, how to what's it called? Canoeing, I think is the other term, logging around the corner. Look, it's interesting, but I think that's the one thing I would look at and say, all right, they've shown it before. Now you got a more capable body in that role, and the overall volume and usage can increase as a result.
Here's the question I have for y'all. Is Texas recruiting, as the program continues to ascend, they're recruiting more of those guys to have in that role? Michael Terry and Nick Townsend.
Yep.
They're recruiting higher level athletes that you can use as weapons in a role like that. That's one of the things I'm noticing as this program continues to evolve under Steve Sarkisian, and it's maybe something in the SEC as well for him and his thinking, but Texas is recruiting higher level athletes to play a position like that can also be a weapon at that position. I think that's something interesting when you look at all these jumbo athletes in this 25 class.
All right. Got another question that leans into that topic that we just discussed. Horn 7, which one of the jumbo athletes makes the biggest impact early? Let's define who those jumbo athletes are, first of all. Jonah Williams, out of Ball High, 6'2", 210-ish. Nick Townsend, 6'3.5", 240, we think, 235. You also have, we mentioned just a minute ago, Michael Terry, 6'2" and change, 215. Maybe Bo Barnes you put in that category.
Lance Jackson
is a bonus-sized athlete at 275. I mean, when you throw 95 on the mound, you're a multi-sport athlete.
Yeah.
Who makes the biggest impact early of these jumbo athletes? I think that's a fair question. I'm not sure. Jerry, you've said this. You've said that it would be Nick Townsend most likely if he were on campus for spring ball.
Yeah.
But I would remind everybody, Kelvin Banks wasn't here for spring ball, yet he vaulted to the first team left tackle the minute he stepped on campus. He literally moved to first team within the first week of being on campus. Who is that of the jumbo athletes? Who you betting on for year one? Biggest impact early. CJ, you look like you're ready. Jerry looks like he's struggling. What do you think, CJ?
Yeah, I mean, in these conversations with youngsters taking over, I mean, we talked about last night on the live stream. Does Texas have a freshman All-American in them? And my big kind of concern with that is, well, where is the position of dire need or the quickest path to the field? I know Texas rotated a lot at safety last year, especially early on before some injuries occurred. So does that open up for a Zealous Hicks or Jonah Williams? I would kind of point to Jonah Williams being that guy that could find rotational time earlier than others, just because going back to tight end, and I know that we're expecting Nick Townsend to play some role at that position this year, but you didn't see Gunnar Helm as a true freshman. You didn't see JT Sanders as a true freshman. You know, Jeff Banks has taken his time developing these tight ends. We didn't see Jordan Washington as a true freshman, more than just some of those mop-up blowout duties. So that's where I find some hesitancy with Nick Townsend. I know, again, he comes in with some physical traits that maybe that group of guys that we just mentioned didn't have in high school, obviously playing defensive end and doing so at a level that was knocking helmets off of cats. That, again, we didn't see that with the other group, but it takes time at tight end that I'm not ready to say right away without seeing him through a spring, without seeing him in summer conditioning. I'm going to lean more so to a Jonah Williams in the back end, because I know right now that rotation is going to be 5 deep. We've already seen that year after year with Texas.
Yeah, and that's my concern too for Nick Townsend. And also, I think too bad Jordan Washington didn't redshirt. He'd be my pick for freshman All-American, by the way. But yes, not being in the spring, that's a lot to pick up in Sark's scheme. I lean to Jonah Williams a little bit because of special teams as well. I really think he's going to factor in the kick return game. Could Michael Terry factor in the kick return game or punt block team along with a role at Texas as a freshman? We'll see. But I think it's going to be interesting, though, because somebody brought up Justice Terry and Brendan Bowersox. I agree he's in that jumbo athlete category. Is he going to play enough snaps? I mean, that's going to be the question. Is there's some really talented guys on the defensive front for Texas. I'll tell you what, for the Texas team, if we ended up talking about a Cade Phillips in that category, I think that would be amazing for the 2025 Texas Longhorns team.
That was the one I was going to ask you about, if you would consider him in that category, because CJ makes a great point. Where is the opportunity?
Right.
For a freshman to come? There's a corner spot open, and Kobe Black is a good prospect. He didn't set the world on fire.
Right.
Neither did Warren Roberson. Jalen Gilbo may not have the speed to necessarily be a corner. So all of that said, where are the spots open? I think there's something at tight end because nothing's settled, even though Jordan Washington and Spencer Shannon have a head start, I guess is the best way to put that, on those guys. And then I think corner more than safety, despite how good Jonah Williams may actually be. That's another thing, is how good are these guys actually once they get an opportunity. That will definitely matter as well. All right, hey, we got more questions to get to. These are good questions today. I'm enjoying the conversation for sure. Before we get to that, I need to say thank you to our sponsor. One of our sponsors this week is Ernie.com. If you are interested in helping Longhorns help Longhorns, it is something to listen to or play, and that's the Ernie Tourney. March Madness is here, and so is the Ernie Tourney, the first ever intercollegiate bracket challenge. Think you've got the best bracket? Well, help other Texas players go up against the likes of Oklahoma, A&M, the entire SEC, and other schools nationwide. The school with the most points takes home the Ernie Cup. Every Texas fan plays together. Highest scoring bracket wins $5,000. Texas fans, this is your chance to showcase your knowledge. Don't let the Aggies or Sooners or anyone else take the crown. Rep the Longhorns and bring home the Ernie Cup. Download the Ernie Sports app or go to Ernie.com to enter now. This is your chance to enter into a bracket challenge Again, Ernie.com or the app Ernie.com, available in iOS and app web store as well as Android. All right, Jerry, tell us a little bit about Cure.
Well, this is definitely a better read when you're at Starbucks and people are walking by. Cure is a plant-based, hydrating electrolyte drink mix with no sugar added. It's natural, delicious, convenient way to keep you and your whole family hydrated without the artificial stuff. It's made with clean ingredients, which means you can stay healthy and stay energized without that 3 p.m. sugar crash on the couch taking a nap. Hydration is the key to feeling your best, and Cure makes it easier than ever. It tastes great, and they offer 7 amazing flavors that you'll love. It's also convenient. You can take it with you anywhere, as each bag contains 14 on-the-go packets that you just dump into that bottle of water. Hydration goes just beyond drinking water. It's about replenishing the electrolytes we lose through sweat, sleep, alcohol, and daily activities like March Madness. Water alone isn't enough to do the job. That's why you need to try Cure, the electrolyte drink mix that tastes amazing as it makes you feel. For OTF listeners, Cure is offering 20% off your first order. Stay hydrated and feel your best by visiting curehydration.com/OnTexas, all caps, using that promo code OnTexas at checkout. Again, that's curehydration.com/OnTexas, all caps. Use that code OnTexas for 20% off your first order.
Let's get right back into it. I thought we were having a good conversation here about young players. Do you think Sark's approach, this is from Jack Lala, do you think Sark's approach of NIL, not talking about it early, helps or hurts with recruits? Jerry and I have been pretty open about this. I think ultimately it's good.
Yeah.
Because they find out and kind of separate who they really want based on that, and then are able to really attack it. Look, they've had number 1 ranked class, number 3 ranked class, number 4 ranked class during the NIL era. So I definitely think Sark's approach is a winning one. But CJ, I want you to weigh in a little bit here. Do you think Sark's approach of not necessarily talking money early, like some schools might, is a overall smart play by Sark, or does it hurt Texas recruiting?
In the grand scheme of things, it absolutely helps. Because, look, you help find kids that fall in love with the university, the football program, the education, the city, before you even talk about the dollar signs. And I think ultimately that's what you want. You want those guys that come in and be a part of the culture before seeing those checks cash, right? That's all about the culture and what Texas has been able to instill here in Austin. On top of that, look, it also provides an opportunity for later on when you see a team down the road go 8-4, or you see a team out west go 7-6, and Texas is continuing to play for a national semifinal game, that they can come in and swoop in and do what they do. And we've already talked about what they do in December. That's tremendous work in flipping and finishing classes the way that they have recently. So I think right now it helps weed out guys who might just be looking for that paycheck early on, and it finds guys who want to go to Texas to play at Texas, to play for Texas, to play for an education, to play in the city. And I think that's something that very early on they're able to find, right? Remember, I look at Jamie French pretty often in his recruitment. Texas wasn't in on Jamie French until about this point last year, maybe even a little bit later, about 2 or 3 weeks down the road when they had spring football practices going on. That was when he finally got to campus and said, wait a minute, I know I'm looking at Ohio State and LSU and Florida State and Tennessee, but there's something about Texas and getting on campus and seeing everything and understanding that it's more to what Texas has to offer than a check. I think that helps them in the long run for sure.
I think there's a couple of layers too to add to that, and I agree. If Texas was 6-6, they'd have to go differently. When you're winning,
you can't lead. You can't lead with culture if you're 6-6.
That's right. You have to lead with the bag, baby, to get the 10. And then 2, I would say this. It's why I like the approach. If you're Oregon and USC and kids are going thousands of miles to visit you, I think it's a different game for them. But with Sark, where he's at now with the success he's had, why would you rush a process when you can get more kids to campus? Like, why would you rush your process when you can get more guys to campus than ever? Could you imagine being a coach and going big on NIL early and getting 10, 12 guys committed, but then guys at the same position come and visit you in the spring and they're actually better fits, then you have to back out of deals, cut guys out from scholarship offers. Texas is in a really good place, and I think they have a really good plan. Could they lose a couple of recruits every cycle because of it? Sure. But when you have the talent, as much talent as Texas is getting to campus, you can live with losing a couple or three guys throughout your process if it means signing the 25 you really want on December 5th.
I'm on the record. Sark, and I want to say this: Sark didn't lead with the bag back when Texas was 5-7.
No.
So you can build it. It just takes a certain. I mean, look, I give Sark a lot of credit, and I think he deserves every bit of it. And to the winners go the spoils. That's the old saying. And right now, Texas is a winner, and because of that, they get to set the rules of engagement to a degree, not entirely. To your point, Jerry, some guys got to jump on the money soon, and that's I get it. Okay. But Texas has uniquely positioned itself not to have to do that. And so the thoroughness with which Sark recruits is one of the things that I really like. And I saw it from the very outset. It wasn't necessarily just staying on the right guys through his entire process, which we saw with the Pancake Factory guys, right? Late, Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams, those guys. It's also that they were on the right guys in the first place.
Yeah.
And that thoroughness, it'd be great. I mean, a lot of these, you think about A&M, they had the greatest recruiting class of all time. What do they got to show for it? Nothing. And it's because even those guys were ranked highly, they weren't necessarily the right guys. They didn't do that level of, search into their DNA of what they were bringing in, right? Now, they had some good players. There's no doubt. One of them may go in the first round, Shamar Stewart. So I'm not saying there's not good players. Just saying from that standpoint, I'm a big believer in what's.
I was going to say this. One thing in sports will never, ever change. It's building a team versus just collecting talent. Now, you have to build a talented enough team, but if you're just out there collecting talent, that doesn't work out as much as people think. And I think it was Bill Belichick that said it. It's every year is about building the best team you can, not just collecting the best talent you can.
Hey, Bobby, for that A&M class that you mentioned, I figured, the folks in the chat will enjoy this. 30 signees. You know how many guys have portaled out?
23?
23.
Wow.
23 of those 30 have portaled out. One, Shamar Stewart, is going to the league at A&M. 6 remain on roster. One obviously being Le'Veon Moss, who will end up in the NFL.
Oh, good player.
Oof.
Bryce Anderson probably will on some level too. Yeah. 23 out. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't bother me one lick. Hey, LL, Jerry, you have any updates? Speaking of guys that made early decisions, Jamion Winfield out of Richardson. He committed to USC a week ago now. Is he still set to visit Texas June 13th or the 20th?
To be determined on the date. He's expected to officially visit. It's just that everybody's staying on him at Texas A&M, Ole Miss. USC knows that's a through-the-whistle recruitment for them if there ever was one. We saw what happened with some of their early commits. A&M's going through a little bit of that right now. But he'll be on campus. I think he'll be on campus this spring as well. There's not a date locked in for that, but that recruiting process will continue. But I don't have what date's been decided there. There's going to be some jockeying there amongst the 4 or 5 teams for that visit. I think it was leaning to the 13th. I think Texas would like him on the 20th. We'll see which way it goes.
Gotcha. Juan Garza here. Could Rodney Terry be Kevin Keats and his last year tournament run with NC State? If you're unfamiliar with Kevin Keats, he's the former NC State basketball coach who took the Wolfpack to the Final Four last year, and this year has been fired. 1 year after taking an NC State team that really hasn't done much in decades to the Final Four, The following year, he gets fired. Could Rodney Terry, if he takes the Longhorns to the Final Four this year, be summarily fired the following year?
Does that mean Caden Shedrick's turning into DJ Burns? I mean, that's the only way.
It's 100 pounds gain. Look, all that would depend on the roster you put together in a short amount of time through the portal in that scenario. So it's hard to say. But, you know, man, Rodney would have to win 5 games with the play, and he'd have to win 5 to get there. Man, that's a tough ask for anybody. I mean,
Jerry, real quick, can I get your immediate thoughts on this weekend's games, this slate for Texas? I know the immediate path.
Yeah, so I think the Texas Xavier winner has a real shot against Illinois. I'm not sure Illinois guards on the perimeter really well. That might actually be a good matchup for either one of those teams. The freshman kid is a tremendous passer. Can he guard athleticism? That's what the NBA is wondering right now. So I think Illinois is, and I'm not saying, look, it's the NCAA tournament. Somebody could go 13 of 25 from 3, and the other team goes 2 of 17, and you're out, period. Yeah. But I think Texas or Xavier has the real shot against Illinois. What's interesting about that bracket, whoever the Texas Xavier winner is, and then whoever plays Illinois in the winner of that game, Kentucky's a beat-up basketball team. And so I know it kind of being a hot pick, Troy to beat Kentucky. We'll see on that. But Kentucky, I think Jackson Robinson's out for the year, their second leading scorer. And Butler, their San Diego State transfer, who's a really good player, I think is a maybe in the tournament. I don't have an update on where he's at today in the tournament. But Kentucky is a beat-up basketball team physically. Who, if Kentucky gets by Troy game 1, whoever gets Kentucky in the round of 32, I think is sitting with that you like your chances if that Kentucky team's as beat up still as they look to be right now headed into the tournament, because if Butler can't go, or if he's trying to go and he's 60 or 70% and Jackson Robinson's out, that dramatically changes a team that was really good the first 20 games of the season for Kentucky. They're not the same team they were when they were playing at their highest level. So whoever comes out of that Illinois, Texas, Xavier side to get to that round of 32, you're in a pretty good spot because you're playing one of the most injured backcourts in the NCAA tournament right now.
I got to say this. I mean, and we talked a little bit, if you missed it earlier, guys, we talked to Tony Hills about having a team, a group of players who know that they're playing for their coach's job. In my experience, having been a long-time observer of sports, that usually works one of 2 ways. It either really helps the team or they bottom out and they lose bad. I don't expect it to be a middling exercise. Like, I think they're either going to come out and have a great run or they're going to go out with a whimper. That's just my experience. And having seen this, if your coach is embattled, you either come out and play really well together and tune all that stuff out, or you lose it and you just don't have the guns at the fight. I felt like we saw the thing that's maddening about this Texas basketball team. I felt like we saw that for 2 games in this NCAA tournament against Vanderbilt and A&M, right? We saw a team kind of coalesce, maybe around its coach, maybe around having Tremont Mark back at point guard or at point guard and Kendall Weaver available again, kind of a little bit of a dynamo off the bench from a guarding perspective. I still don't know what to think of this Texas team. And I think when that comes to March, that's not a good sign. You typically know who you are by March. We're in March and we still don't know who this Texas team is. So I don't have a great feel for this tournament or for Texas's opportunities in it. I'm hopeful, but something about it gives me cause for trepidation, I guess is the best word.
You know what's interesting about this team is going into the season, when they started practice down, Mark had an injured ankle before practice started, it got better. He was really good in the TCU scrimmage. Then he rolled his ankle before the Colorado scrimmage, and it took a long time to get back from the second one, right? They tinkered and were playing him as the off. I'm not sure. He's not really a point guard, but the offense initiator because he's 6'5". You can see over the hard hedge. He's their best straight line driver, and he's an underrated playmaker. So what you saw in the SEC tournament was what they wanted to actually be in the preseason, but then all the injuries happened. But so here's the interesting part about that. And I told Bobby this. I may have said it in the text. There was a thought that Mark was actually going to be their best college player this year. And they knew Trey Johnson's the best scorer and the most talented guy. But because what Mark could do for the team, he might actually be their best college player, not best pro prospect. The last 9 games, Mark's been 15 points and been more efficient, and now he's running the team. If they get that trim on Mark for another extended period of time, and Trey Johnson has one game where he goes, I'm going to go get me 28 in this game, they're pretty tough to beat because they scored. Then they're able to score 78, 80, 82 points on you, who plays pretty good defense. That's what's really interesting is the Draymond Mark that they thought they were going to have is what they've actually had the last few games. But is it going to be enough? Is it going to be enough? Because when you get into these games right now, if Trey Johnson, they play so much isolation ball outside of the initial offense, if I'm Xavier, if it's me, I let Trey Johnson play ISO ball and shoot it 20 times, and I'm going to be like, I don't want Draymond Mark to get going against me tonight. If I'm Xavier, that's my plan because I see that the success they just had with the move they made, I got to take Draymond Mark out of this game. And I'll live with Trey Johnson if he goes for 28 or 30 and it's on 22 shots. I'll live with that because I think we're going to be good enough around that. But if I'm Xavier, I got to take Draymond Mark out tonight because if he gets comfortable and he has success, Texas may score enough points to keep moving on.
One final thing before we move back to football, guys. You said he's been back for 9 games, and Texas is a little different. Texas is 3-6 in those 9 games still. That's what I mean. So even when they're I don't know what to tell you. I'm kind of, in that scenario with basketball right now where I just don't have a good feel. They've been mediocre for most of the year. It's 4:20 somewhere. Do you think we have anyone on the roster to play the Jaden Blue role and be our receiving back in 2025? Could an Aaron Butler do that? He's not that size. He's not a running back size at all. They've flared people out on those orbit screens to Xavier Worthy, though, before. So I'm sure Aaron Butler could do that kind of work. But as far as a true running back threat, do they have that person right now? Is that – Jerry, you mentioned Ricky Stewart long-term in that kind of role. But they certainly don't have an approximation right now, in my opinion, of either – Jaden Blue or Keelan Robinson prior, right? That has that kind of jet atmosphere out on the outside. Y'all, CJ, Jerry, either one of you think they have that on campus right now?
Not at the running back spot yet. Now, again, when we were down in Orlando, when we were down in San Antonio getting to see some of these guys for their All-American Bowls, they were able to display their hands, but they didn't, for the most part, these guys don't have that speed of a Jaden Blue. And I think that's to be expected, right? Does anybody fit that mold right now? Look, I don't know, but again, it kind of goes back to what a Michael Terry role could grow into for me. Again, it's not that quickness, it's not that speed, but it's a guy that you can move around and know that he's going to be a threat in the passing game for you. Could he be an option? I think that's interesting. But James Simon, Ricky Stewart, could they eventually grow into it? This spring for me is going to be big to know exactly what might their ceiling be here at Texas, knowing that these roles are always going to be available for them in the Texas offense to be threats in the passing game. I just don't know yet. I don't know.
Jerry, I don't see anybody on campus. What about you?
I think it's going to be interesting within Sark's scheme how different the offense actually looks. More RPO, more quarterback on the move, more true running back. Like Jaden Blue was never going to be the runner, fit the scheme as a runner. I think you're going to have more of a runner in that place that fits the scheme. I think it's going to be – do they have that player? No. But I'm not sure Sark would scheme it the same with Arch anyways. That's there because they're going to throw it down the field more. The YPA, CJ, is going to go up this year.
Yep.
And so would Sark – this offense within his scheme, I think, is going to change pretty dramatically this season.
It may. I think the scheme will, but it doesn't take away. I don't think they have the back that's the Jaden Blue type, first of all. So let's answer that question. Jerry and CJ, when they were inside the 20, their most effective play was throwing it to Jaden Blue. I'm just telling you, I mean, get him one-on-one ISO coverage, throw it to the empty side of the field, one-on-one. It happened against A&M. It happened against Ohio State.
Twice.
Yeah, 14. I mean, he scored 14 touchdowns. Even if you change your offense, I mean, they weren't very good in the red zone to start. And you're taking away one of the pieces that was good. All right, let's go to Jackson Watts here. Jackson has, what are y'all's thoughts on Kelvin Banks dropping in the draft? I've seen some of this. Last mock I've seen is him coming to Houston at pick number 25. A friend of mine, I want to say this, a friend of mine's a scout for an NFL team. And I was just talking to him about Texas players because he knows I follow Texas closely. And he asked me about Kelvin Banks. And I was like, I don't care where you pick him. He's a 10-year starter in the NFL. So maybe a 10-year starter at right tackle or left guard or left. I mean, a left tackle 10-year starter is definitely worth a top 10, top 15 pick, right? Is it worth it if it's a guard or a right tackle? I don't know. I don't know those formulas, I guess is the best way to say it. But I think you pick Kelvin Banks, you're picking one of the more surefire picks in this draft, not necessarily at left tackle, but as a starter and solid player for your team for a decade to come, if you want him. You know, I don't know the value of that, though. But I would tell you that he may be dropping, but he's not going to have a worse season because of it. What do y'all think about that? Do y'all see him dropping? CJ, I know you monitor the draft heavily. Jerry, either one of you guys want to comment?
I don't know particularly what the reason is for him going lower in the first round in these mock drafts. I always think back to Rod Baber saying you go to the combine, you go to the pro day, and all these NFL scouts look for reasons to not draft you. So maybe they found something, but I can't figure out what it is after looking at the last 3 years of the tape and what he's put out there for the Longhorns at left tackle. All I saw him for 3 years do is stonewall the best edge rushers Texas played. So I don't know. And again, the questions about the arm length, the question about the size. Look, the one guy that is compared to Kelvin Banks the most, he has about 7 inches on a wingspan for, and that's Will Campbell. So I'm not entirely sure why he's sliding like this, right? Left tackles are a premium position. So I would be no surprised at all if he ends up going 12th, right? Or 11th to the 49ers, right? It's just one of those things where at this point you're coming off the combine, the highs, the lows, and you're throwing, stuff at a whiteboard, hoping it sticks ahead of the draft.
I think maybe his issue is he's not a freak athletically. And they want freaks athletically in the top 10. Now he's a great player, but is he a freak athletically? No. Jerry, what are your thoughts on that? Then we'll get going here.
Well, I think there's some games being played too within the draft right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. It wouldn't shock me if he goes 10 or 12 or 14 either. I mean, I don't depend on team needs, right? But look, I mean, I just go back to this. Remember the NFL, one of the knocks on Derek Johnson was, well, is he physical enough? All right, he's a maybe Hall of Famer. Is Casey Hampton tall enough? He's only over the ball player. All right, all Steelers all-time great. It's the same thing over and over again. Like CJ said, I always say they're looking for warts. That's all this is. But I think there's some games being played. I'll be surprised if he goes outside the top 25. That would surprise me. He's a better player than that.
Top 15 for me, I would be surprised. because he's a top 15 player in college football. All right, now I want to say thank you one last time to our sponsor of every Wednesday's Coffee and Football. That is Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. Thank you very much, Adam, for your sponsorship of On Texas Football. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, including an ATV to an 18-wheeler, and think you might be due compensation, look up Adam and his group on loweylawfirm.com, and they'll get back to you and they'll offer you a free, no strings attached consultation to see whether or not you might be due compensation for your injuries. Again, that is loweylawfirm.com. Thank you, Adam, for your support of On Texas Football. And CJ and Jerry, thank you guys for joining us today. We missed Blake Monroe. He will be back hopefully tomorrow. But in his stead, we've got State of the Program coming a little bit later. We've got a live stream tonight. We've got more. You guys, make sure you check us out on ontexasfootball.com as well. For CJ, Jerry, I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good week. Thank you also to Tony Hills for joining us. And it's 9:36 a.m. and OU still sucks. Okay.